Traditions by Raven Maiden. Chapter 2. Present Day. Draco's rage over what happened to Hermione's parents wasn't as consuming as it used to be, but it still flared from time to time, when he saw her suffering, when he thought about what it had cost her, what it had cost them. He closed his eyes and remembered. He had been spying for the Order for 9 months and secretly seeing Hermione for 3, when Voldemort had ordered his followers to increase their efforts to target the families of Harry Potter's inner circle. The Grangers had been at the top of his list. Draco had delivered the news the same day he heard it. As terrified as Hermione had been, she and the Order had believed her parents were safely hidden. But they had still taken precautions. Kingsley had worked with the Muggle Prime Minister to purge them from official records. They had charmed their former neighbors and colleagues with the sudden desire to move out of the city. And Moody had recruited Oliver Wilson, an old ally of the Order's, to watch over the Grangers in their new neighborhood. It was Antonin Dolohov who ultimately had a breakthrough by finding the realtor who had helped the Grangers sell their home. He had torn through her memories and had discovered a small town in Australia they had mentioned in passing. It had been enough. He had killed the realtor and had traveled there that evening. On the night Dolohov had come for Hermione's parents, Oliver Wilson had been violently ill, thanks to the questionable cooking of a Muggle neighbor. By the time he had recovered enough to perform his typical check-in routine, he had found the Granger's curtains drawn and their lights unusually dark. The silencing and Muggle-repelling charms cast around their house had confirmed his fears. He had rushed to give word to Moody, who had arrived with reinforcements within minutes. But by the time they had penetrated the threshold, Dolohov had vanished and the damage had been already done. It had taken months, but they had eventually pieced together what had happened that night. After Dolohov had broken through Hermione's memory charms and had realized the Grangers knew nothing about their daughter's whereabouts, he had violently torn through their memories, beginning with her earliest days at Hogwarts. He had been searching, he had later confessed, for memories of Harry. He had then tortured them for hours with the Cruciatus curse. As the result, their memories of Hermione for the past 8 years were raw and excruciatingly painful when retrieved. Unstable, the healers had told them, prone to creating intense discomfort, trauma, and disorientation. 2 weeks into the Granger's stay at St. Mungo's secret new location in Liverpool, the healers in the spell damage unit had finally reached a prognosis. They had recommended another overarching memory charm to stitch together her parents' brutalized psyches, a charm that concealed or transformed the memories Dolohov had ripped through with the precision of a blunt knife. Some memories will have to be implanted or hidden entirely, but the primary aim would be to modify their existing ones. You went to boarding school, not Hogwarts. You're a bright young Muggle, not a witch. This lowers their chances of traumatic flashbacks while minimizing the invasiveness of the procedure, the head healer had told them. It's possible that true memories will return in time, but it's difficult to say. Draco remembered how pale Hermione had been when she heard the news. He had been there with her at the time, disguised as a random Muggle. If you choose to go that route, we'll work with you closely to craft and perform it. If you choose not to, they will need to stay here indefinitely while we experiment with other possible cures. The little color left in Hermione's face had drained. I'm sorry, Miss Granger. I wish I had better news. I'll give you some time to think about your options. With a final pitying look, the head healer had left them alone in the vast hallway. Hermione had stared at her retreating figure until she turned the corner. Draco had caught her when her knees gave out and she sank against him, sobbing. A soft noise jolted him back to the present. Hermione was weeping. She was remembering too. "Shh," he said, pulling her to him. "We're lucky. They're alive, aren't they? They know you, and that's enough. I just wish I could have done this right." "But you did." She brushed away her tears. "You did do it right. The circumstances can't be helped." Draco nodded, his lips pressed together tightly. Although he felt deeply selfish admitting it, it bothered him that they were forced to conceal the truth about their relationship from her parents. They would be upset and hurt probably if we showed up and announced our engagement, Hermione had said a few months ago when they had floated the idea of spending Christmas with her parents. "They don't even know about you yet, and not mentioning a serious boyfriend, let alone a fiancé, is out of character for me. It's far less complicated if I tell them you're my boyfriend. I can say I didn't tell them about you sooner because I wasn't sure if we'd have to part ways for graduate school, but it ended up working out. We can tell them we're engaged in February." It had made perfect sense at the time. It still did, but the irrational part of his brain hated it. He had changed and risked everything for her. He wanted her parents to know what she was to him. But it would have to wait. "A few months is nothing," he said finally. "They'll find out soon enough." Hermione gave him a watery smile. They both stared at the blinding ring on her left hand. She slowly worked it off her ring finger. The ring was another reason for him to be sulky. 8 months ago. "I'm looking into flats to rent," said Hermione over breakfast one morning. Draco paused in the middle of chewing a sausage link to stare at her. He swallowed thickly. "Sorry?" "Flats," she repeated, "to rent. My parents are planning to buy a home close to London, so I can't stray too far from the city. They want to visit me when they move back, so the plan is to tell them that I'm transferring to University College of London within a year or so and find a place in the city that's suitable for Muggle visitors. I found a lovely area with a mixture of Muggle and magical residents, and it's close to the tube." "The what?" "I'll explain later," she said, waving a forkful of hash browns. "I just wanted to let you know because we both need to think about finding a new place to live." The forced casualness in her tone suggested she had been planning to have this conversation for some time. He narrowed his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I'm telling you now, aren't I? The point is that this situation isn't sustainable. I'm the only member of the Order still living here. I live here. Actually, your official residence is Malfoy Manor. I haven't been there in weeks." She shrugged. "It doesn't matter. The war has been over for 5 months now. We can't keep impinging on Harry's generosity, officially or unofficially." He frowned. She had a point. "Even so, you should have told me before you went looking. I deserve a say in this." "I know," she sighed and stabbed at her hash browns. "I've been hinting at it for weeks, but you've been distracted, and I didn't want to burden you." "What do you mean, distracted?" "Well, you couldn't deal with another burden during your trial." "An annoyance more than anything," he dismissed. "I never doubted the outcome." "And then right after that ended, you lined up your interview at the ministry, which I knew you were anxious about." "Anxious? The interviewer was scared of me." "And you're starting a new job in 4 weeks, and I start mine in 2. And we have Harry and Ginny's wedding in 3. There's never going to be a good time. I just thought I'd rip off the band-aid. Band-aid? His eyebrows vanished into his hairline. Never mind. The point is, we need to move out soon. I understand if you want to move back to the manor, but I took the liberty of asking the landlord how many properties were available, and there's another vacant flat next to mine. She bit her lip. Draco's stomach twisted. He thought they were happy, but now she was suggesting that they live separately. He had taken her feelings for granted, it seemed. So this is your way of telling me you don't want to live with me anymore? He clenched his jaw. Are you going to tell me what I did wrong then? Or were you planning to write me a letter? Her mouth fell open. You didn't do anything wrong. I love you. Apparently not, he bit out. Her incredulous expression morphed into one of exasperation. You can't be serious, Draco. I'm not breaking up with you. We have to move out of Grimmauld Place. This is a logical solution. Living close to each other makes sense before we think about our next steps. Next steps, he said coolly. You know what I mean. I don't, actually. Enlighten me? She was blushing furiously now. What I mean to say is a more long-term commitment. I'm not assuming you'd want that, of course. I'm only saying that if that was something you could see happening at some point in our future, that would be wonderful, because I feel the same. There's no pressure, of course, she continued hurriedly. I'm not in any rush, and living next to each other will keep us happy while we get our lives in order. Nothing would change. We'd still spend every night together. He glared at her. Where was she going with this? I know, it's silly to have two separate places. I don't even know why I care. She took a deep breath. I just can't stop thinking about my parents. I lied to them enough as it is, and I know they'd be upset if they knew their daughter, Muggle or witch, was living with her boyfriend. So that was what this was about. Draco fought the urge to laugh. I see. Well, I have a different solution to this little problem of ours. He leaned forward, smirking. And you know what it is? Draco Malfoy, if you propose to me so we can keep shagging under the same roof, I swear to Merlin... Isn't that a bit unfair, Granger? I think my actions prove I have only the noblest intentions when it comes to you. Although I won't deny that convenient shagging is a bonus of getting engaged. Her lips twitched. Pratt. She was still flushed, but she looked pleased, relieved even. She stood up. I told Ginny I'd help her with the wedding this morning, so I need to get a move on. But I really don't want to pressure you, Draco. We have plenty of time to think about our next steps. And I know we're both starting new jobs too. All the more reason to get engaged and ward off your future co-workers, he thought. I do need to give our prospective landlord an answer, though. He promised to hold both units for another week. Please think about coming with me to see them. She cleared her plate, gave him a long, sweet kiss, and left him alone with his thoughts. The solution was obvious in his mind. He always knew it would happen. He just hadn't thought about when. Hermione was right. He had been distracted. But now that his trial was over, his many possible futures stretched before him. And every single one of them included Hermione. He went to his family vault at Gringotts later that day. There was a long-standing tradition for the man in his family to propose with a legacy ring. Women who married into the family would then fashion a ring of their own after a major life event, such as an anniversary or the birth of a child. The new ring would replace the legacy ring, which would move to their right hand. It was his family's way of honoring the old while embracing the new. Although his family had been nearly destroyed by its bigoted ideas about bloodlines, he wanted to save its traditions that were worth saving. He wanted to give Hermione the full Malfoy experience during their engagement, if she would have it. He had a particular ring in mind for her, one made for his great-grandmother, Aurora Malfoy. It had a large, yet tasteful, round, brilliant cut diamond surrounded by a halo of blue sapphires, a nod to the birthstone of her son Abraxas, who, like Hermione, was born in September. The delicate platinum band was inlaid with diamonds halfway down each shank. It was simply, yet exquisite. Narcissa had loved it so much that she frequently wore it on her right hand in lieu of the legacy ring Lucius had proposed to her with. Draco could only hope it was one of the many heirlooms she had locked away in the family vault after his death. His rickety minecart finally reached its target in the cavernous underbelly of Gringotts. He recognized the telltale golden M emblazoned on the door of the vault, a design choice made by one of his more stupid and arrogant ancestors. His goblin escort pressed a long-fingered palm to the door of his vault. It swung open. Two magical pillars on either side of the room sprang alight, beckoning him to the treasures within. The goblin bowed and gestured for him to move forward. He did, and the door swung shut behind him. Draco passed by heaping rows of gold, cabinets of fine china, and other trinkets, heading straight to the wooden chest at the back of the vault. He had watched his mother go through it many times as a child. The top two drawers were exclusively rings, tucked away in velvet wrappings and boxes. He rummaged through them. The first drawer contained rings with precious jewels, including rubies, amethysts, and emeralds. Draco thought most of them ugly and ill-suited for an engagement ring. He moved on to the second drawer. These rings were almost all diamonds, but none of them fit the bill either. They were either too small, too old-fashioned, he grimaced at a particularly hideous marquise-cut ring, or simply not Hermione. He couldn't imagine her with a pear-shaped diamond or a solitary diamond with a plain gold band. He eyed the last unopened ring box. The white satin cover embroidered with a golden LM cued him into the box's owner, his great-aunt Lyra Malfoy. She had never married and made a great show of spending her share of the family fortune on herself. He opened the box. The ring featured an enormous oval-shaped diamond surrounded by a double-edged halo of diamonds. The delicate band was made of a yellow gold and inlaid with yellow diamonds. It was impeccably crafted and stunning to look at, although the size of it was obscene. The center stone had to be at least 4 carats. He slipped it in his pocket. He couldn't find his great-grandmother's ring anywhere. His mother probably had it with her at the manor. He grimaced at the idea of asking her to give it to him. He wasn't ready to. "Hello, Draco." He whipped around to find his mother standing at the entrance of the vault, eyeing him coolly. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I might ask you the same thing." "Are you spying on me, Mother?" "Hardly. An anti-intruder charm warned me someone was in here. I had one installed after a Potter broke into your aunt's vault. I have every right to be here." And he did. Upon the death of the head of household, the Malfoy estate was automatically split between the surviving spouses and any heirs. "Be that as it may, you still haven't told me why you're here. Are you short on money? I have no idea what you're up to these days. You haven't answered my alts in weeks." "I'm not short on money, and you know I won't write back until you apologize to Hermione." Narcissa's nostrils flared. "I see no reason. I see every reason. I brought her into our home, and you asked her if she was expecting. You humiliated her. Pardon me for thinking you had an ulterior motive for forcing her company on me, she said with a delicate sniff. I tolerated your little infuriation during the war, but it's over. Pretty though she may be, your continued obsession with that Muggle-born makes no sense. It won't work, Draco. Draco stared at her incredulously for a moment. Still singing the same tune, I see. He shook his head, lip curling. You're just as much of a psychopath as father was. How dare you? Her voice shook. I supported and lied for you for years, but you want more. You'd destroy everything your father stood for, everything we are. We'd both be dead or rotting in jail if not for me, and you know it. He began slamming the drawers closed, not waiting for her reply. His blood simmered as he bit down the insults that bubbled on his tongue. It was remarkable how little she'd changed, despite all they had endured, all they'd lost. The old way is dead, as it ought to be. The only future our family has is through her, and you'd better get used to that. He took a deep breath and turned around to face her. I'm asking her to marry me. I want great-grandmother Aurora's ring, the one with the sapphires. He searched her face. Please give it to me, mother. Narcissa shut her eyes, grimacing like she was in physical pain. He waited for a long, painful minute. When it was clear she had nothing to say, he moved towards the door. I want you in our lives. We both do, but it's your move. He moved past her and left. He got home late that evening. He had several errands to run, including getting his finances in order and looking at a few houses in Muggle-friendly neighborhoods. Hermione, however, was later. She stumped in at 8:45, looking like she had walked straight off a battlefield. There was a large smudge of dirt on her cheek, the right knee of her jeans was torn, and her hair was poofy enough to rival its worst days at Hogwarts. She collapsed next to him on the couch. Don't ask. Draco raised an eyebrow at her. Wine? Please. He conjured and poured her a glass. Thank you. She took several large drags before speaking. We started clearing out garden gnomes for the wedding today. They put up quite the fight. Quite the jungle they have there. She turned to him. I've been thinking a lot, and I want you to forget about our conversation earlier. Oh? Yes. Well, not really. I mean, part of it. She scooted closer until they were hip to hip and swung her legs over both of his own, resting her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. I'll move in with you, Draco, and we don't have to be engaged. He wished he could see her face. He tightened his grip. Why the sudden change of heart? She sighed, tracing the rim of her wine glass. I've been taking care of myself for years. I'm more than capable of making my own choices. That you are, he said. He felt her smile into his shoulder. I know what I want, and I want to be with you. We're already living together. There's no point in separating us, even if it's just a bit of dry wall. It's wrong to deny what's best for us because I'm worried about disappointing my parents over some silly tradition. Fair point, but not all traditions are a bad thing. She picked her head up to look at him. True, but this one is. When we get engaged, it should be because we want to, not because of some archaic idea that living with you out of wedlock makes me a scarlet woman. A scarlet woman? Again, don't ask. Her lips twitched. Shall we look for bigger places this weekend? Draco didn't grow up in a demonstrative household. For the Malfoys, love was something to show through one's actions in a private, dignified way. His father often scolded his mother for being so affectionate with him as a child. It was another one of his family's values that he had begun to crumble, thanks to Hermione. The things he wanted to say to her, do to her, anything to make her keep smiling at him that way. He channeled his emotions into a crushing kiss. Deal. Good. That settled then. She closed her eyes while he nuzzled her hair. After several minutes that were sure to make Lucius Malfoy roll over in his grave, she pulled away. Where is Crookshanks? Probably sulking around our bedroom. I saw him in there earlier. She peeled herself off the couch and headed upstairs to find him. Draco followed her to the foot of the staircase, watching as she opened the door to Sirius' bedroom, the one they now thought of as their own. He had deliberately left Crookshanks in there an hour earlier and had cast a silencing charm so Hermione wouldn't hear his yowling. You accidentally locked him in here, Draco. Draco smirked to himself as she stepped inside. There you are, he heard her say, over the cat's plaintive mewling. I don't know how we didn't hear you. What's this? Draco had tied a green ribbon around Crookshanks' neck, which was threaded through a small velvet pouch. The ring was inside, along with a bit of parchment. You're mine, Granger, and I play for keeps. Marry me, D.M. The sound of Hermione's wineglass shattering on the floor told him his message had reached its target. He headed up the stairs 2 at a time. Oh my God, she said, her voice thick. He caught her when she flung herself at him. Present day. Draco watched the ring sparkle impressively in Hermione's palm. As happy as the memory and meaning of it made him feel, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't right. Hermione was too kind to say anything besides how beautiful it was, but he was certain the spectacle of it embarrassed her at times. Such as earlier today when the elderly Muggle who owned the car rental shop had joked that the ring had inflamed his cataracts. At present, however, Draco had bigger problems than an ill-suited ring, and if he was being honest, he would be happy to see it back on her finger. His possessive side was highly displeased with the bare state of her left hand. Hermione slipped off the silver necklace around her neck, a gift from her parents when she passed her OELs, and threaded the ring through it. It glittered brightly on her décolletage. Worn like this, it could probably spot it from miles away. She frowned down at it. Well, that's not exactly inconspicuous, is it? Draco smiled in spite of himself. He pulled out his wand and elongated the chain several inches. He tucked it deep inside her shirt, so the ring was nestled between her breasts. There, he trailed his fingers across her skin while slowly retrieving his hand. Safely hidden. Thank you, she said, cheeks pink, but no more magic for the rest of the weekend. I know. Shall we get a move on? Actually, I was going to tell you to quit trying to seduce me while we're staying under my parents' roof. It isn't going to work. I'll promise no such thing. She grinned and started the engine. They left the driveway open for us. It's the second house down, the one with the Christmas wreath. They parked and retrieved their luggage. They had arrived in the nick of time, it seemed. The wind was picking up and snow swirled around them more heavily. Her parents' home was brightly lit inside. Hermione rang the doorbell. She smiled nervously at him. He tried to smile back, but his face felt frozen. Don't screw this up, he thought. Shadows moved behind the glass beside the door. His stomach swooped. Here goes nothing.